Hello, friends. We've had a lot of very technical presentations today. Many formulas, many very detailed strategies. But we're going to talk a little bit now about how we make decisions. How can we make good decisions that actually are clear to ourselves and clear to other people? We've been talking about change all day long. Change is inevitable. There's no possible way forward without changing. But the real question is, what do we want from this change? All the things we've talked about, what do we actually want to accomplish? And how do we get the change? Not technically. How do we convince other people and we convince ourselves that this is change that we want? So I'm going to take a little departure from some of the other presentations, and we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy. We know Lao Tzu. I think many of us in the room know about HVAC. We know about carbon capture. We kind of know about Lao Tzu. And one of the favorite things that he said is, watch your thoughts. Watch your thoughts. Why do we watch our thoughts? Because if we have to watch our thoughts, because our thoughts can become words. We have to watch our words because our words can become actions. We have to watch our actions because actions can become habits. We have to watch our habits because they can become our character, and we have to watch our character because it becomes destiny. Now, why is this important? So if we just look at these for a moment, the thoughts turn to words all the way down to the destiny. Now, Lao Tzu wanted us to just focus on the next step and really concentrate on the next step. But at the end of this whole process, there is destiny. It's the end. It's what finally happens. But this philosophy does not think about the destiny. That's not the point. You think about only the present, only the next step. So it's really a process that goes in one direction, from our thoughts and our very first steps until we get to the end. This is a very unique way of thinking about the world. So here's the question. What if we start with the end? What if we start with destiny and we work backwards? What we decide, we argue, we agree. What is our destiny? Then we work backwards. Our character, our habits, our actions, and then our words, and then we know what to think. But this is not a philosophy from 600 year BC. However, a little bit later, a few hundred years later, we have another kind of philosophy. This is Marcus Aurelius, great Roman emperor, great philosopher. And he, interestingly, had something kind of similar. He said, watch your thoughts. But he worked backwards from the end. That's very different from Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu thought, just think about the next step. Don't think about the end. Marcus Aurelius says, think about the end first. Think about the very, very end. Then think 1 minute before the end, 1 hour, 1 year, 50 years before the end, and then you know what to do tomorrow. We have so much technology that we've learned about today, but the goal is not to use that technology. The goal is to accomplish something else, to achieve a virtue. So it's a different philosophy, working backwards from the end. This looks very easy, very, very hard, because we cannot agree all the time on what is the virtue. We don't agree on what is the end. I bet you even in this room, after a whole day, we probably could not agree amongst ourselves what that end looks like. Move forward a few hundred years, like almost 2,000 years, we have another lady. She's not a great Chinese philosopher. She's not a Roman emperor. She's a sociologist. She's a nerd. But she was thinking about this process of working backwards from the end. And she thought, instead of the thinking, what is the challenge? Not what is the thought, what is the challenge? And then she has this similar process, but she also was imagining, how do we work backwards from the end? And this is a very technical idea, but actually you'll see that it's also a very philosophical idea. And she called this theory of change. Theory of change. Theory of change is not a theory. It's not like a philosophy. It's just a process. And what it requires us to do is think of the end, the impact that we want to achieve, all the way back to destiny. I mean, to the input. Working from the end all the way to the beginning. So if you see, Lao Tzu would say words instead of input. He might say destiny instead of impact. But it's the idea of working backwards from the end all the way to the beginning. Now, what do these words mean? All of us in the room, if we are leaders, if we are consultants, if we are engineers, designers, architects, we already do this. We just didn't realize we are already doing it. And this gives us a way to explain our thoughts to ourselves and to other people so that we can manage change. Now, all the way at the end, we have impact. What is impact? Well, these are very big, simple words. They're political words. When a leader says, I want society to be good, I want people to be kind, this is impact. But what does good, what does kind mean? Well, if you want to be good, if you want to be kind, if you want to create a strong society, how do you measure that? Well, that's outcome. That's the effectiveness. That's the long-term KPI. Okay, that's the long-term KPI, but what do we need before then? That's the process moving in this direction, okay? So again, this is just philosophy, but now we're trying to create steps along the way that other people can follow. Now, I was asked to talk a little bit about one particular project. I mean, this is one project that I've worked on, but I'll show you not just some images of the design, but I'll show you a secret that we had in our team in the background that allowed us to prove that we were in the right direction, that we were creating change for a certain objective, for a certain impact. So a scene like this is very common in many European cities. You have railway yards, which are no longer useful. They're near the center of the city, and they typically have one owner, which is the railway company. And we are trying to regenerate a brownfield site, an industrial site, into something new. So I pulled together a team, and we won this competition, and we were proposing to create an urban development. Now, this is 20 hectares. It's not that big. In Shanghai, you have projects that are many, many times bigger. But our impact, which you'll see, is to create environmental protection, social inclusion, and economic growth. So those are impacts. These are kind of political words. But how do we convince a politician? How do we convince a bank that social inclusion will happen or environmental protection will happen? Because right now, this is a nice project. We're creating a park, some buildings, a new train station. How do we convince people that that's what we're doing? So these are just some details. You can sort of see in the middle of the area, we used to have this huge railway track. We're creating a new park, some hotels, some office buildings, residential buildings, a train station. If you've been to Milan, you know that this is the Prada Foundation over here, if you've ever been to Milan. Also great design there. So in the middle of the park, we have a place for the trains to go underneath, and we build up a park on top of the train tracks. But then on either side of the park, we create a forest, a suspended forest that's covering the tracks where people can walk along the track, but they don't see the track. The tracks are below them. So we call it the suspended forest. So these are some examples of that. And a member of my team was Elizabeth Diller Scofidio. They did the High Line in New York. So obviously you can see a little bit of her work here. Of course, there are lots of technical details. We do these kind of details all the time. You do too. And this is a normal part of a competition. We have lots of technical documents showing how we recycle the water, how we manage the energy on this site. This area also had to be used for the Olympics, for athletes' villages. So we have diagrams that show all of that. We also show how the transportation network looks. What we didn't show until the very end was a theory of change. And this is the theory of change that we used for Porta Romana. But we can do this for any project. And you can see at the end is the impact. Look at the words: environmental protection, social inclusion, economic growth. This is what a politician says. A politician doesn't know about technical things. The politician doesn't care about technical things. All the politician wants is to achieve the impact. But we are technical people. We have to allow the impact to happen. So what do? We work backwards from the end. And then we can say, okay, what is an outcome? Well, before you can have social inclusion, we have to have a welcoming atmosphere. We have to have shared identity, so people can have something in common. Okay, that's a little bit more precise than social inclusion. But what do we mean by welcoming atmosphere? Well, here's how we're going to measure it. Okay, these are kind of like short-term KPIs, but how do we get to that? Well, this is the process that we need in order to go in this direction. Okay, well, what do we need before the process? Well, we have to hire some people, we have to mobilize, we have to create budgets. So this takes very big ideas and breaks it down so other people can follow the thinking. And if you are a bank, for example, and you're trying to invest, how do you know that the investment, that if this is something that we want, how do we know that the investment will lead to it? Well, we have to have discussions with all the different stakeholders and agree on these KPIs. So we do this all the time. You have done this many, many times before, but maybe you didn't realize that actually you could work this through as a process. So that's what I mean by theory of change. So here's another project I'm working on right now in Belgrade. We show lots of beautiful drawings. We have the design. I can talk about the green area, open space, but what I really am thinking about is destiny. I'm thinking about the impact, and I'm working backwards in my mind with all the different technical groups to make sure that all of our work is going in the same direction. If we are using IoT, if we're using technology in some way, we also need to know why we are using the technology. We're just not using the technology. Technology is not destiny. Technology is not the end. It is a way for us to create change. So even if you use IoT, we use theory of change to make sure that it's going in the right direction. If we have projects that are not design projects, but they're about sustainability in some other way, some social way, well, we can solve a health problem or an environmental problem with a theory of change. So this is one example. This is basically to address the challenge of women who had domestic violence. Maybe there was some fighting in the family, they had to leave the family, and we're trying to find a way for an agency to create a stable life for women who are affected by violence. Okay, this is not to do with carbon capture or design. This is a completely different idea. But how do we do this? How can we prove to ourselves and to other people that we're going in the right direction? Well, we do a theory of change. We work backwards, and then we go all the way to the input. If we started over here, we don't really understand the logic of how we go all the way to the end. So that's just another example of theory of change. Now, here in China, we all know that Xi Jinping talks about climbing the three great mountains. The three great mountains, there are always three great mountains. But the three great mountains right now are education, healthcare, housing. But what does he really mean? What is the impact? What is the destiny of all of this? Excuse me. Well, it's something to do, I think, with equality, creating opportunities that are shared for other people. So if he was trying to create theory of change, he might also say right before the impacts, he would have issues like this: reducing inequality, becoming healthier, creating returns. So these are the outputs right before a political term. And if we have a theory of change, we can think about how we can go towards these goals. We start at the end, and we work slowly, 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 all the way to the beginning. And that's how we can get it. We get the right people in the room, so it's going to be a balance of people like ourselves here, technical people, engineers, designers. Maybe we have, in the theory of change, we decide we need different kinds of people in the room, and we talk, and we agree what is the end. That is it's easy to figure out what the next step is. It's very, very hard to agree on what we're actually trying to accomplish. But we think backwards from destiny. We think backwards from the end. That's what we mean by theory of change. Thank you very much.